Good morning, friends, and welcome. Happy Mother's Day to current mothers. We might extend that greeting to all, since all of us have probably been mothers in one incarnation or another. The wisdom of the ages, as passed on to us by HPB and WQJ, and those following in that path that they showed, lays out our birthright to immortality. This path to immortality is laid out in the Secret Doctrine and other works of Mr. Judge and HPB and those who followed that line. You can find parts of this system in the religions of the world. The path to immortality is an obligatory pilgrimage that each of us must take. Neither HPB nor the masters that she represented nor anyone else can take it for us. They can only point the way. The path to immortality is a very challenging and slow process. HPB warns us repeatedly about the charlatans out there who claim to offer shortcuts in exchange for money and other services. Yet they are so subtle that even the most educated continue to be duped. The mission of ULT is to keep the message of Theosophy as passed on to us by HPB and Mr. Judge available for those who find it. This mission is laid out for us in a few paragraphs by Robert Crosby, who was a witness on the scene after the passing of HPB and Mr. Judge. The dilution of the Secret Doctrine and the allowing of Isis Unveiled and other original writings of HPB and William Q. Judge to go out of print, he witnessed, and he changed that. He got them back into print so that we may approach these teachers directly. We gather here at Suite 230, 4865A Cordell Avenue in Bethesda, Maryland, every Sunday at 11 o'clock to discuss a particular topic. We also have study classes every first and third Sunday, where next week we will begin reading and discussing the ocean of Theosophy. You can get more information on our website at www.ultdc.org, or way better yet, by coming to our meetings, which are open to all. Each lodge being sustained by students to the degree they make commitments to themselves only, there are no admission charges, and the only tie that binds us is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. Our reading today is from the Voice of the Silence, starting at the bottom of page 5, where it says, "Bestride the bird of life, if thou wouldst know. Give up thy life, if thou wouldst live. 3 holes, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 holes, O conqueror of Mara, will bring thee through 3 states, into the 4th, and thence the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. If thou wouldst learn their names, then hearken and remember. The name of the first hall is ignorance, avidya. It is the hall in which thou sawest the light, in which thou livest and shalt die. The name of hall the second is the hall of learning. In it thy soul will find the blossoms of life, but under each flower a serpent coiled. The name of the third hall is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akashara, the indestructible fount of omniscience." Today's talk is on the psychic nature. Next week we will discuss gleanings from the Theosophical Glossary. On June 1, from 1 to 4:30 p.m., our New York Lodge will present Reflections on the Future. ULT New York is located at 347 East 72nd Street, zip 10021, phone 212-535 2230. New York Lodge also called us this week to wish us a good White Lotus Day, which we celebrated last week, and New York is celebrating today. So now for today's talk on the psychic nature. Do not turn it off, please.
Good morning and welcome everyone. As the first speaker introduced the subject, he also read a very poignant passage from the Voice of the Silence, where it said that there are 3 halls that each pilgrim travels. And the first one is avidya, which is ignorance. It is this world, the physical world we live and we die in, if we do not question as to our inner nature. And the second path is the hall of learning. So the hall of learning then is that psychic nature that we will talk about today. So we all have it. We all have a psychic nature. However, to really understand it, we need to understand the principles of human nature and how these correspond to the cosmos or the universe we live in. When HPB came on the scene, she immediately went towards the psychics of that era because she wanted to validate the reality of what was being experienced. And in one of her writings she says that this age that we are in will see our psychic nature develop. And for that, all this literature was put out to show us our principles, how they correspond with the universe, and how we are to approach this natural development that is coming about in us. So, what exactly does psychic mean? Well, in that era, it just was simply that the person was able to function to some degree in the invisible aspect of the universe, and of course herself. But she says that the astral is to such degree developed in those beings that it impregnates all of their principles, and it puts a tremendous pressure on all of their nature. Now this is the abnormal, but the scientific world is of course acknowledging that we have a psychic nature, but to which principles they say it refers to is not quite clear, because the psychiatrists of our era do not really know how to heal people. So where should we start? Should we start with our principles? As said, we have 7 principles, 3 higher and 4 lower. The 3 higher are the immortal aspect of us. The 4 lower are the principles that enable us to live through a physical body. So we have a higher principle, a lower principle, and what connects the 2? The middle principle. So we just take this off. It's right here. Herb said not to touch it, and that it does quite well where it is on here. So what are our middle principles? Oh, I'm not doing very good today with my writing. Principles. Okay, middle principles. So, the spiritual nature then is connected to the physical nature through the middle principle. And what is it? It's our psychic nature. So the spiritual gets connected to the physical by our psychic nature. So the psychic nature is the one that is plastic. It stretches, it changes, it grows. And in the human principles, how do we define this? She came to show us that we're not astral kamic, but we are human manasic beings. Because if you look around, in which principle the human being lives is very obvious from their behavior. So those who are in their astral kamasic live what kind of life we'll discuss, and those of us who are manasic, what kind of life do they live? Manasic, with the higher aspect of it, pulls us towards the spiritual. What is that? That's our Buddhic nature. The Buddhi has to be activated in this manner. When we use those principles, that's how it becomes activated. It's not like it doesn't exist. It's there. We all have it. We all use it, whether we know it or not. And the human immortality has to come about through this shift in the manas. This is Buddhi. What is it defined as? Wisdom. Wisdom. So, are these principles separate from one another? Absolutely not. We are individuals, but nature shows us that there is no separation in anything, that there is an interrelationship amongst everything, and we're told we are part of this circle, that each one of us as an individuality has his or her own place in the universe, but we constitute in our totality the universe itself. And this we must always keep in the background of our mind, that we are interconnected, that life cannot exist without that interconnection. In fact, if we did not perceive one another internally, we could never communicate anything to one another. So our nature then is clairvoyance and telepathic, this nature here. At all times. At all times. Just depends in which direction we're going. What is this nature? What is the astral kama? This is our feeling nature. This is our reasoning nature. So, this is the outline without giving a lot of detail about it. And we will read a little bit from this article that I wanted to bring a few points to your attention. In this particular article, it says that either we totally accept the system or we totally reject it. That combining it with other things do not work. That the system must be self-evident to the believer. How do we come to that conclusion? Is it common sense? Well, we're told common sense is a sanctified common sense for Theosophy. It has to sit right with each individual to make sense. That's the first rule. What's the second rule? Until these principles are active, can we really verify what we are told? So, we accept it at face value until we develop these principles in ourselves, because they're not just out there, they're also in us. Buddhi is a general principle because wisdom is in the logoic center. It is in the ideation that flows outward from that light center. So it's everywhere. Wisdom is everywhere, Buddhi is everywhere. So we take a portion of it and personalize it, use it for ourselves. And it is that use that either lifts the human nature to divahood or brings it down to the animal. Because our physical frame is an animal frame. We are the highest on the chain of that developmental stage. But we are not the animal. We are the human family of the Dayan Chohans. We have these great spiritual ancestors. The Pitris gave us their chaya. The Kumaras lighted our mind. Dhyani Buddhas give us our individuality. We are not animals. We are divahood in manifestation through the physical body. So, may I? So, this is the master's program. This is the master's philosophy that came into the world through HPB. Now we have to ask ourselves, if she was their representative truly, then what she brought into the world is the truth, as close to the truth as it could be written and given out to the world. The rest is up to us to internally perceive. So we said that our perception is what? Twofold. I put it down here. It's telepathic and it is clairvoyance. Oh. Okay. So we have both in us and we use it. And we need to ask, as the scientific world is asking, which is the normal state of humanhood? That we function at this level at all times, but because of our use of those principles, that myopic existence occurs because we are allowed to use that bit of the mind that the physical world is feeding back to us. So this perception needs to expand itself in all aspects of our being. So what is being said here is that the psychic nature at the bottom is kamasic, kamamanas, in other words, in us is active. But at its upper end, the super psychic faculties are these. So that is also connected. It just depends where we are and how we balance in our usage of these principles. So, and Kama, remember Kama Giva is at the core of the universe. Its concern is for the well-being of all. It's what we do with it when we personalize it that is not showing that aspect of itself. So if we start here and we're going to go over there, then we're going to end up with this Buddhic principle. So I want you to understand that we talk in bits, but that everything is connected. It's not separate from one another. So when we use our kamic principle, what do we do with it? We put personal stuff into it. Personal lower mass. And this is lower only in relation to the other. In itself, it's an intellectual capacity. It's intellectual. So up this end, it becomes spiritual. And faculties then become active. And what is it that we're actually doing? It's a spiritual. So the spiritual puts that light on it, and it shows you what it is in its inner nature, not in its physical aspect, but in its inner nature. It shows you the core of whatever it is that you're considering at that moment, because you have learned to focus the mind to such a degree that you can withdraw it from the external world and subjectively or objectively in meditation focus it on one thing only. That's what meditation is. So when these principles are active, then it's a spiritual faculty. But as we are moving up into the psychic world, it's going to cause problems for us. And we need to ask why. She tells us in the Secret Doctrine that the astral world is the lowest level of Akasha. It's the lowest of Akasha. Sometimes it has an H, sometimes it doesn't. So, the Akasha, she calls it primordial divine Akasha, because it's this aspect of it she's referring to. It's a spiritual fluid. And remember, in the transactions, she calls the interstellar atoms the garments of the gods. So all the way from the highest to our world, what is it that we're using? Interstellar atoms, garments of the gods. In their physical form, then, they become atoms in our universe. She tells us substance has never been created. It is immortal. It's not just that the spiritual aspect of life is immortal, but the primordial atomic aspect is also immortal. It is homogeneous, and when that Akashic light receives the impulse from the logoid center, what is it? It's an imprint as to what is going to happen during that mantra, and it evolves. As times go on, it evolves. And the scientific world now is asking, is this our normal condition and not this down here? It is this that is our normal condition, but what we do is we camouflage it. We put veil after veil after veil in front of it, and we do not perceive the truth, but it's what? It's upside down reflection of what we give to the astral world. It then gives it back to us. So astral is the lowest level. It is pure in itself, but what we do to it makes it very impure, because all our thoughts, good, bad, and indifferent, gets imprinted onto it, and then it reflects back onto humanity itself again. So between the manas and the physical life then stands the astral, until we learn to overcome its power. We cannot totally become manasic human beings. And what does that mean? It means we have to learn how to use it for beneficence. How do we do that? And I'm going to read this statement to you from this article, because when we look around, we do see wrecks, psychic wrecks everywhere. And it is important to understand that it is a power, and it can wreck. It can wreck. Describes the two sections of Theosophists. One who went after phenomena, not the philosophy, but the phenomena of the astral. Apparently it is intoxicating. This student does not know what that means, having not experienced it. But those who have say that it has that power to hold you there, whatever that means, that you become engrossed in what you're seeing. And what does that eventually do to you? It's elusive, in other words. It holds you in the elusive aspect of your nature, because that's not the truth. Astral light reflects the earth's emanations, not the heavens' emanations. It's what we put into it that it reflects back to us, plus it's upside down, plus it's between physical and the mental, and we have to go through the astral to get to the mental. Okay, one lot is after learning to look at it, but not from the philosophical perspective as to what it represents and in what relation are we to learn it and learn how to use it. The ones that get intoxicated by it are the ones that go to it and they look at it and they get a very partial view, but they think that's real and that's the truth. So that elusive nature then pulls them in. And the second lot, it says here, are the ones that don't want to have anything to do with psychic nature. They don't want to hear about it. They shun it altogether. And both of them are wrong, because this is our natural developmental stage, and we use it all the time, because without the psychic world, how do we go, for instance, in what do we do in sleep? The physical aspect falls quiet, then we move into the astral, and from the astral we move into the mental, and from the mental we move into the spiritual worlds. Every night the soul knows how to traverse these fields. It goes and comes back. But Mr. Judd says what we need to develop is a narrower path of passage. That when we go, it's like we use a tube, for instance, like a tube. You are going through this tube. Each night you go through the same tube, and then you come through the same tube. Rather than it being a disseminated principle, you make it a particular passage, so that eventually you learn to remember what is it you do on the other levels of existence. Because she says those are the beneficent stages we go through when we are in the higher aspects of our life, because the soul is not of this world. The soul is spiritual. It lives in a spirit when the body falls asleep. So it knows how to go up and down these pathways. What we need to do is teach the personality, or the lower aspect, to remember what he visualizes with the assistance of these higher principles as to what goes in those realms. Because once the lower mind falls asleep, where's the connection? Because the spiritual life and the physical life is connected through the middle. But once the middle falls asleep, there is no connecting link. So we don't know what's happening up there, because we're asleep down here. So once the brain centers open and become active, they enable the personality to remember better. In other words, our brain has to become of a better quality, is what Mr. Judge is telling us. Okay, so it says here, our psychic world that we encounter is not cleft from one another. In other words, what we do during the day is translated into our dream world at night, or vice versa. When we come back, our dream world is translated into the physical. What's the dream world? Where do we go in our dreams? It says that when we dream, we're in our psychic state. Where is the psychic state? We have to move into the astral world. The astral body then corresponds with the astral field of the universe. And what is it a repository of? Our emotions. Now everybody tells me, I love my emotions because it's a teacher. Correct, it is a teacher, but it also fools us. because emotion is not dependent on reason. It's dependent on your feelings, and depending how you feel, you go to the right or you go to the left. And this is how love, hate, good, bad, clear, mixed, all this stuff comes about because of that nature. And if we don't understand it, we won't be able to control it. And here in this world must come about the right ordering and regulation of the psychic nature. It is here our contacts are forever made, ties of liking and of hating, ties of sympathy and repulsion is formed right here on earth. The psychic nature is our feeling nature, and that nature responds to joy, pain, noble, ignoble, and so we need to understand what it is. That's what philosophy does. It gives a basis of understanding as to what goes on in us so that we can clearly define what it is that we are doing. It says that it is shared by all of the kingdoms because it's a general principle, below and above the human, and we just shown how that line goes up and down. And this psychic nature is everywhere, correct? Because it's also a principle in the universe. So how do we see it in the universe? Affinity. Chemical affinity is the psychic nature of the elemental world because they attract or they repel. This is how compounds come about. For instance, table salt, sea salt. All those compounds come about because of two elements joining together their forces. Water, H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. Well, when they separate, the water is not visible, but hydrogen and oxygen, even though we don't see it, they're gases, they're there, right? So the invisible nature brings about what is visible, but behind that stands 7 levels upward. Because each world is 7 levels, and 7 times 7 makes 49. So we have 49 levels of consciousness. Our spiritual nature is 7-fold. Our self-consciousness is a result of this evolutionary process going on, and the kumaras lighting up the mind and making us reasonable human beings. So, what does it do for the flint and platinum, it asks? It gives it its characteristics. You can rub it together and make fire, for instance. Well, if it didn't have that in it, would it be possible for us to get fire from flint? It wouldn't be. And for the flower, what does it do? The flower responds to the rays of the sun. It absorbs nature's energy, photosynthesis, and produces food. And all of our world is dependent on plant life. It gives it aroma, it gives it color, and it gives us nutrition when we eat it. So the garments of the gods are in the things that we truly eat. That is why it is also a sacrifice. And we need to use it beneficently, what comes into us. And we talked about chemical affinity. So our psychic nature then is our response nature, how we respond to what is coming in and what is going out from us. Would we, it says, to learn to use it normally, we will learn to interpret its responses by the force of our awakened spiritual nature. So this nature is essential to interpret what's going on down here, because this gives us the true perspective as to what is going down here. It enlightens the lower aspect of us, in other words, that Buddhic nature. We would learn to interpret our responses by the force of our awakened spiritual nature. and change its responsiveness to low, mean, selfish, and convert it to noble, high, selfless. So this is how that change comes about. So the psychic nature then we all have, and it is the part of us that needs regulation and training, because it is our response nature, it is our feeling nature. And here is another point made. Longings for selfish gratification, interpreted to mean mere sensuality, are considered less corrosive and less destructive, because apparently it is considered harmless. Harmless. And it says it is not harmless. What is it based on? Sensuality and sensuousness is based on self. It's selfish. It's personal oriented. It's selfish. And what that does, it weds the mind to matter, which is down here. That is why it is hyphenated, kama manas. So the manasic then is entrapped by matter. So concentration in our psychic principles, it says, to the exclusion of else and lack of consideration for the welfare of all those that come into our sphere, means that that psychic environment is eclipsing the spiritual being temporarily. Too many such eclipses and the being may lose entirely that higher light. This is a scary. While the reflected light of matter and separateness seems to the individual the only light. The only light. So that lower aspect has the power to cut off the higher aspect if we concentrate our energies on it. So this is spelled, it says, failure in the evolutionary struggle for the individual, and soulmate also for the race. Failure or success trembles in the balance of our psychic nature. Depends what we do with it. So normal clairvoyance is defined as seeing by undimmed light of a spirit on all planes, all the way up to down. Psychic normality can only be achieved by discipline and effort, through understanding that the spirit is the true seer and never the seen. So who's doing the seeing? The spirit is doing the seeing. What is the vehicle on the physical plane? The eye. The physical body has no powers of its own. It's the inner psychic aspect of us that enables to see color and so forth, and then the brain translates that. So if we want to truly see the truth, then our Buddhic nature has to shine that light on whatever it is we're looking at and show us its inner nature, so that we do not get fooled by the psychic nature. That the psychic plane is as much a battlefield and more in every truth than the waking life in the world of men. That only the steadfast will, with a capital W, devoted to the good of all creatures, can invoke its powers with impunity and beneficently. So, if we are not concerned for the welfare of all, that is in our psychic environment that we live in, we fail of the first rule, because we said karma is concerned for the welfare of all. It is not particular to this person, that person, and the other person. It is a general principle. It's based on love, and its concern is welfare for all beings. So until that becomes imprinted in us internally, and we work from that principle outwardly, can we only then activate these principles in us, because the first rule is the beneficence for all. And the masters then represent that condition perfected. Their concern is for the welfare of all. They can put themselves in any position because they're at home everywhere. On land, in water, in air, they're at home everywhere. Why? They have become part of the all. Their perception is perfected. They can put themselves in each of our place and know where the holes are, and that is how they help in our sleep if we have earned it. They come and show us the truth so that we may awaken and remember what the truth is. So they're able to help move nature towards emancipation of the soul from matter. And this is immortality. Thank you. Now we will open it for questions. Yes?
Recently, I've just been introduced to the Rosicrucian philosophy in a booklet that was sent to me. And it seems as though, coincidentally, talking about a lot of psychic gifts and development. What I noticed was it didn't seem to be heavily concerned about, as the Kama Deva is, on the benefit to all, is to use these gifts for the benefit. It was there somewhere, but it wasn't very pronounced. So it seems as though they were focusing on doing the development of these psychic gifts for the benefit of self, to develop it, rather than having it happen in a more natural way. And so the question is, can people work with it, with developing it in a more concentrated, artificial way, or do these psychic gifts really come from being concerned about others?
There are two types of yoga. One is Raja Yoga, which is mind and soul development, and the other is Hatha Yoga, which is physical concentration and control of the breath. Everywhere in the writings it is stated Hatha Yoga is not recommended, which is what you're referring to. And the reason is that the breath is not referring to perhaps the physical breath, but what's behind it. And this student is not familiar with that system at all, so I'm simply passing what I have read, and I'm sure it's only a little bit of it. And it says that at the end of the life, you should ask yourself, what have I learned, and what is it that I'm going to keep from what I have learned? If it is physical, are you keeping it, is what you really need to ask. Because the physical aspect of our nature drops until the following reincarnation, when we're going to come back and pick up where we stopped to develop our nature to immortality. What's immortality? Immortality is perfection. Immortality can only come when all the lower aspects are made subservient to Buddhic spiritual nature. So when it becomes a natural outcome of your service to humanity, whether it be metaphysical service, whether it be service to benefit and uplift human souls on earth by helping in whatever capacity that you can, or by teaching what you learn, you can pass it. And the statement is, if you can only influence one other, you have done your duty, because that other then can influence another, and the other can then influence, and it's like a chain reaction, one lamp lighting all the others. It's the same principle here. One can influence another, and that other will then influence others. And that is how this consideration for the welfare of those in our psychic environment comes about. In other words, my concern is not towards myself. Is myself, lower personality is what it is called, permanent? It isn't. It's only here for one life only. I am Tunjai Halil Densler one time. Namarupa is only for this incarnation. But my individuality, my inner self, is for all time. And it can only take with it that part that has been perfected. Otherwise, it drops. So this is what each individual has to ask themselves. What is it that I'm achieving with the effort I'm making? If it is personal self you want to develop, it's going to drop off at the end of this incarnation. And you're going to come back and have to work harder, because it gets stronger. The elementals and the atomic structure that make that body retain the impressions of the life for the next birth. So it's going, you're going to come back and work harder to overcome what you have impressed on those lives. Yes, have I answered your question? Yeah.
The flip side of the previous question, just to explore it, is that if we affect all others through the astral plane and the karmic nature, then can we say that if we have been selfish, maybe not being aware of it, reflecting to the astral planes, negativity and so forth, that affects and has some affinity to some individuals who may be susceptible? Are we in fact culpable in some sense if they do something harmful to others? Is it true that because we're all one, we have to bear some responsibility on some level for something that may be going on in another part of the world that we feel like we're separate from because we live here? But is that true? Is that real?
Well, we said at the beginning that we are interconnected, that it is very obvious to any thinking human being that that interconnection exists. And HPB tells us that physical errors do not carry as much responsibility as those that are caused by thought. Because, as you just said, it's electrical and it is imprinted. And she tells us that we are responsible for all of our thoughts, regardless of what it does and it does not do. We're putting it out, we're responsible. Why? Because its effect is going to come back right at us. So that's the first. The two, that the susceptibility, as you mentioned, does exist, because she says some of the suicides occur that way because the susceptible mind is being influenced in sleep without their knowledge. So that is there. What we put on the astral light then does affect each and every one of us, but some human beings are more susceptible to its effect than others. The ones that have made a stand and are determined and cultivating the inner nature in the sense of service as foot soldiers at the bottom have gone through some experiences before, and they are in this life solid, standing against that current. But on the astral field, if we haven't learned how to if we haven't learned how to deal with the electromagnetic field, that's where we're susceptible. Yes?
Oh.
Yeah?
Okay. If thought is this powerful, and I know you've explained this before, there is a concept in many different religious paths, prayer, and concentrated thought on healing, or let's say prayer for things going on in another part of the world. And yet HPB does not really talk about prayer. There's another word, will, or something like that.
Will prayer.
Will prayer. If you could explain the difference of that, and then how can will prayer affect other parts of the world that where humanity might be suffering?
What did we just read in this article? It said that the will has to be active. It is, and it was capitalized W. I just read it to you from here. I didn't underline it, but it's in here. Only it says the active will, yeah, here it is, that only the steadfast will devoted to the good of all creatures can invoke its powers beneficently. So, okay, first of all, what is this? What is will? It's volition of the higher ego. It has a counterpart too that we use for personal things, because behind will stands desire. If we don't want to gain or do something, this cannot be activated. It is a colorless principle in nature. Colorless. We define the color as to how it's going to work. So this will is the volition of the higher ego. And in the Gita, it is defined as that power that goes out like lightning and cuts all difficulty asunder. And Krishna says to Arjuna, arise. What are we arising to? To the occasion. Because in the Egyptian mysteries, man is crouched down, lion man. It has its representation in human life. We're crouched, and Krishna says, stand up, take your appropriate position in life. The appropriate position is your diva nature, not your animal nature. That's why that lion man is flat. He's telling us, arise, assume your responsibility and stand up, because you are not the animal man, you are the human man, and you are the diva man. Stand up. So this will, when activated, does what? Cuts all difficulty asunder. It helps you achieve the outcome of the goal, but it is to be cultivated through that steadfast will devoted to the good of all creatures. If it isn't devoted to all of the creatures, you fail of the first rule. What's the first rule? Unity, on which brotherhood is based. And that is based on that interconnection that we have to one another and all of nature. So when you have will, prayer, this becomes a command. It is not a passive something you're putting out there. You're going inward and you're demanding it of yourself, and you're then guiding that energy outward to do good in the universe. That's the difference between will prayer versus prayer advocated by the religious systems. She says there is no one out there who's listening. We might as well pray to the absolute. It's not my words. I'm simply repeating it. She says we might as well pray to the absolute. There's nobody hearing us out there. But when you go inward, the higher self is there. Whether you know it or not, when you cultivate it, what does it do? It shows itself to you. What is it? It's your light. It's that inner light in us. Yes?
I appreciate the choice of word that you use, cultivate, because cultivate, if we think of a plant, it's an active process. You might turn the pot to put it in the light a little better so the backside of the plant gets the exposure it needs. Maybe it needs some extra dirt, it needs some water, it needs some attention. Cultivate is a science.
It's an active process.
Exactly. It's not just,
passive.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you. That's a very good point. Yes. So we have to participate actively in cultivating that nature, but why do they put that sentence there? Good of all creatures has to be there, because she says, it's on page 289 or 287 of the Secret Doctrine 1. She says all these powers that naturally come alive in us has an intelligent conscious entity. Where? At its entrance. Who are these? Who are these beings? The hierarchies. Of Diane Chohan. Is this there? I don't know if that's 2 H's or.
You got it.
Diane Chohan. They're archangels and angels. And the writing says there is higher heavens and lower heavens. And when the Bible was interpreted, they changed it. They put heaven and earth. It is not earth. It's higher heaven and lower heaven. Earth is not part of heaven. Earth is hell. This is where we come to learn. This is where we cry and experience pain. This is not heaven. Heaven is a rest period. Devakan, where we go to assimilate what we have learned, so that hopefully we'll come out as a higher individuality, more manasic than animal. So until we qualify to enter, we cannot enter. There's a conscious entity at the doorstep, and she says that they know. This is why this is an internal process. She says, don't expect to be initiated by a process. She says nature does it naturally. And when you have gone through the door, you don't even know it. But afterwards, through experience, you become aware, perhaps, that you have gone through it. So your concern is to serve as a foot soldier, because there's a statement, and I will close in a minute, a statement where it says the army of the light, the army of the light. So when we become foot soldiers in the service of humanity, we have become what? Part of that army. The army is Diane Johanic hierarchies. From high heaven to low heaven, and human family of the Diane Chohan's men, we're all connected, because the highest principle of the highest Diane Chohan is in me. It comes from the core of the logoic light. I'm not separate from anything. If I truly accept this philosophy, then I know I'm interconnected to the higher heavens as well as to the lower heavens and below to Hades, which is hell. Yes.
So, is it that just, they say, as in heaven, so in earth? Let's
Reflection,
say, okay.
correct?
Reflection. So, let's say an oak tree has an acorn.
Yes.
The acorn maybe is us in a matter of speaking, and the acorn has the potential of the length and breadth and depth of a fully grown oak tree.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in this acorn, and it's
the
waiting
seed.
the seed. So is it that the Dayan Chohans, the hierarchies, that essence is within us also
in
but
germ,
it's waiting
in germ,
in the germ form, waiting the seed germ, waiting to be activated and cultivated. Cultivated, thank you. Activated by cultivation. So
germ.
And what is it? You know, we are all we all have that within
all
us.
of us.
But what is it within the different individual expressions of this that has caused it to be cultivated in some and not cultivated yet in others?
We said it. If the karma manasic principle is in ascendancy, it pulls down to earth. If it is the Buddhic spiritual, Buddhi manas, that is in ascendancy, it pulls you to the heavens. That's the only two things that can happen in human life. That you're either giving energy to your animal self, or you're giving energy to your spiritual self. There is no other way that this can be achieved. Karma manas, in conjunction with your personality, is self-oriented. All for me. Nice clothes, beautiful home, lovely furniture, big cars. What am I going to do tomorrow? What party am I going? What holiday am I going to have? Which beach am I choosing? All that stuff is personal. It degrades the human soul. That's not its mission. Its mission is to get rid of that elusive element out of itself, become a manasic human being, which is its birthright. In other words, manas is fully active and your diva nature is active. Once you activate, then the Buddhic nature is with you and it assists your efforts in the right direction. That's the only two ways you can do it. Yes?
Okay. Now, this may be a silly question, but I need some answers. Just as, let's go back to the metaphor, if you will, of the oak, the acorn. Let's say the acorn is planted, or any seed of a plant is planted. We can very easily access water and take water and feed that and water that that plant, that seed, to cultivate it. We can make sure that it's planted in the right light, has the right environment. But for human beings that have that germ of that seed of the Dayan Chohans, if those of us that would really like to participate in the Kama Deva to be able to help other people, what would be equivalent to that water that we could provide to souls to help them cultivate their spiritual nature?
What do you feed your soul nature is what you're really asking, Andra.
Yeah.
What would you feed your soul nature with? We just defined it. Service to humanity. That you remove the little self out of the equation and do not give it force. Because if you do, then you're bound here on the lower aspects. The spiritual nature, it says, knows what it needs. It needs altruistic service. And I repeatedly read this sentence: devoted to the good of all creatures. Not humanity, but all of the creatures. How do you treat your dog? How do you treat your cat? How do you treat your plants? Kathy said you can turn it around and enable it to get sunlight all around. Well, isn't that same with you? If you're only taking physical food, but you deny cultivation to your mind through spiritual food, would it not shrink? Anything that is not used shrinks. We said that this is our plastic nature because it has the capability of growth, cultivation. So cultivation is in your hands. Depends which aspect of the mind you're feeding. The lower aspect is personal. The higher aspect is impersonal. The higher aspect is altruistic. It is interested in the well-being of all creatures. We cannot achieve this in a one-step fashion. And I will read this and then we will finish it. And if you have any questions, we can do it personally, but I must bring it to a close. Towards psychic normality. This is Mr. Judge. The very first step towards being positive and self-centered is in the cheerful performance of duty. Try to take pleasure in doing what is your duty, and especially in the little, in italics, duties of life. When doing any duty, put your whole heart into it. There is much in this life that is bright if we would open our eyes to it. If we recognize this, then we can bear the troubles that come to us calmly and patiently, for we know that they will pass away. You can solidify your character by attending to small things, by attacking small faults, and on every small occasion, one by one. This will arouse the inner attitude of attention and caution. The small faults and the small occasions being conquered, the character grows strong. Feelings and desires are not wholly of the body. If the mind is deliberately taken off such subjects and placed on other and better ones, then the whole body will follow the mind and grow tractable. Old age only makes this difference. The machine of body is less strong, for in old age the thoughts are the same if we let these grow without pruning. So thank you very much.
Thank you.